Hi, this is Kelly Gay, and I'm here to talk to you about some strategies for supporting literacy in the content areas. This is for EDU 742 Study Skills and Content Literacy Instruction for All. So, the idea of literacy in the content areas for me was kind of a big aha moment in my last course. I'd never really given thought to literacy instruction and what that would look like in a content area classroom. I know here at Ridgeview that it is, as I think it is in most schools, a common misconception that by the time kids get to fifth grade, they should know how to read, and therefore it is not their responsibility to teach those literacy strategies. And a common comment from a teacher is, well, this child is reading below grade level, they cannot access my material. So, what do we do? So, before I could even start to discuss this with the teachers, I had to help myself understand the difference between content literacy and disciplinary literacy. Content literacy focuses on teaching general reading and writing skills that can be applied across all subjects. The goal is to help students comprehend and engage with texts and subjects such as science, social studies, and math. So, content literacy is what we teach in our ELA classrooms. Okay. So, example, they are going to focus on those general strategies such as summarizing, questioning, making connections, all of those strategies that are for comprehension. Also, focusing on the basic skills such as decoding, fluency, vocabulary, all of those things that support reading comprehension in all areas. And then the broader application that encourages the use of common reading and writing practices across different subjects. Disciplinary literacy is the literacy that focuses on teaching students the specific literacy skills and practices that are unique to each discipline. The goal is to help students think, read, and write and communicate like experts within a particular field. So, for example, like a science class, they're needing to learn to read scientific journals or understanding a lab report, interpreting data from charts and graphs. History, they might be reading or analyzing a primary source document or understanding historical data, maybe evaluating differing perspectives. And then in mathematics, they're going to be interpreting word problems using mathematical language. Um, so kids need to have explicit instruction on how to even approach some of these content area literacy scenarios that they'll be encountering. So, first off, I think a change of mindset needs to be is needed. Um, I'm going to read this quote. Even though educators recognize that reading proficiency is needed for learning across the curriculum as well as for success in the workplace, reading instruction is neglected in the secondary classrooms. So by secondary, I'm thinking middle level, high school. Um, some secondary teachers believe that reading instruction should not be a part of the secondary curriculum, claiming that students should master the basic literacy skills in the primary grades before moving to middle and high school. That's just what I was saying a minute ago, that many of these teachers feel that that literacy piece is not part of their job and what their instruction entails. But the fact of the matter is literacy instruction really should continue indefinitely. It doesn't just end when they finish fourth grade, right? So how can we support our content area teachers in helping incorporate some literacy strategies into their instruction? And how can we also help them better see that by doing so, it's going to improve their student achievement and their outcomes? So let's take a look at a couple strategies that can be used to help content area teachers include literacy instruction into their repertoire. So I've chosen interactive read aloud, some people call them think alouds, and also sharing the purpose for reading. Those are my two strategies that we'll be focusing on today. First, teacher modeling using interactive read alouds, basically helping students become aware of the thinking that goes on inside the mind of a proficient reader. So I use think alouds a lot in my second grade classroom and even in my kindergarten and first grade classrooms where we're reading a book and we're modeling out loud how we are inferring or making predictions or asking and answering questions, but we're modeling that out loud, saying what we're thinking, so those students will see the metacognitive piece that goes along with thinking about your reading. We talk about reading is thinking all the time, and comprehending a book is all about thinking about what you're reading while you're reading it. So a big concern for teachers as they're looking at the Common Core state standards is, how can I ensure that my students read and understand increasingly complex text? So one of the first things as far as modeling is that we need to help them access the complex text through modeling, but it's going to require updating what we know about what think alouds and modeling looks like in a regular ELA classroom. So an interactive read aloud with a complex informational text will require a different focus than would an interactive read aloud around a fiction story. And that makes perfect sense. So what is an interactive read aloud? An interactive read aloud is a time where a teacher is going to choose a mentor text. They're going to have a specific goal in mind or strategy, whatever their learning target is at the time. And they're going to read the book with some specific areas. So you're going to read the book first, and you're going to have some specific areas pointed out and planned so that you'll know what your comments are going to be, so that you can model the thinking that is going on inside a reader's mind. So instructional implementation of a teacher model involves a proficient reader, the teacher, thinking aloud in a conversational manner of a content area text in a way that illustrates and scaffolds for students how to build the new knowledge and language about a topic and about the features and structures of the text in which the information is contained. So like I was saying, the first thing that you would do is select a mentor text. So appropriate for your students' reading level, appropriate for their interests, appropriate for their whatever the standard is that you're teaching. You're going to go in and identify the key points for your think aloud. So that means you're going to have to read the text beforehand, mark specific points where you'll be modeling your thinking. You also want to be planning your think aloud comments. So prepare what you'll say during that think aloud. Think about making either predictions, asking questions, making connections, visualizing, inferring, clarifying, all the things. And then you're going to introduce the think aloud strategy. So you're going to explain to the students what a think aloud is and what the purpose is. You're going to specifically point out the purpose of a think aloud, which goes along with my next strategy. You emphasize that it involves verbalizing your thoughts while reading to model how skilled readers think. So you're going to start reading the fiction text aloud to the class and pause at your pre-selected points to model your thinking process. So at each pause point, you might verbalize your thoughts using prompts like, if you're predicting, you might say, I think this character might. Or if you're questioning, I wonder why the character did this. If you're making a connection, you could say, this reminds me of a time. Visualizing, you might say, I can picture the scene where. When you're inferring, from what the character just said, I can infer that. And then clarifying, I'm not sure what this means, so I'm going to go back and reread this part. Hang on a second. Let me get rid of that from my screen for you. Why isn't it going away? Sorry about that. There it goes. So when you're engaging the students in the process, you're going to provide scaffolding and support, and you're going to continue reading and thinking aloud throughout the entire text. I mean, we all know that students love to mimic or model what their teachers are doing. This is a perfect example of a way to do that and show them what's going on inside a proficient reader's mind. So they talked about having to change up the think aloud and looking at some other components. The four new components when thinking about think alouds for informational and more complex texts means, again, looking at the factors of complexity. So teachers must read and analyze the text prior to reading to ensure proper text complexity. The disciplinary thinking it involves the discipline from which the text was drawn. So, for example, a science text differ from social studies, or science text and social studies definitely differ from a regular literacy text. So the thinking needs to align with the discipline that's currently under investigation. So reading like a scientist, or reading like a historian, or reading literature. Fisher cites Shanahan and Shanahan as saying the students who read informational texts as if they were stories will not succeed at text as text complexity increases. Word solving includes looking inside words for word parts, prefixes, suffixes, etc. Looking outside the word includes like context clues and resources. And it also must model when word solving doesn't work. Sometimes we can't solve the word, or we can solve the word, but we still can't understand the meaning or how it's being used. Students love to see that the teacher sometimes struggles too. Or when you're reading and you're like, oh, that isn't what it says. Let me go back and reread that. It shows, one, that we all make mistakes. That's what readers do. But readers also notice when it's not making sense, or if they have questions, and they have strategies to help themselves. The last new component is the comprehension piece. And it just says make the most of comprehension strategies such as making predictions, visualizing information, determining importance, and so on by explicitly labeling the strategy and the factors that made the text complex. So, some key components of modeling. These two critical teacher behaviors in the area of modeling can make a significant difference in the outcome for students. For one, an I statement. I statements make visible um, internal processes of the speaker. They invite the learner into the speaker's thinking. The I statement alerts the listener to the internal processes of the speaker. They also invite the learner into the speaker's thinking and do not suggest that the listener, you or the student, has to do anything. And then the modeling should include metacognition. So modeling the because, modeling the why, modeling the how of the thinking. And then sharing examples of how you came to that understanding. Students deserve to hear the because, the why, and the how of the thinking. If they only hear the I statement, they're likely to have a good idea what the teacher is thinking about, but not how the teacher came to that understanding. So if the teacher provides examples and the thinking behind the example, the student can develop the habit the teacher is modeling. Also, let me go back to this for a minute. I wanted to add that in 2011, Fisher and Frey conducted a study around teachers using modeling versus teachers who did not. They included a total of 446 students in the study. The results showed that there was a significant gain in the students' achievement when their teacher modeled their thinking about reading on a daily basis. That was a very powerful statement to me because that shows that this is a research-based model that has proven to show significant gains in student achievement. Okay, I'm going to move on to my second strategy, which we talked about a little bit already, and that's providing learning intentions and making purposes for reading clear. Fisher and Frey say students have a right to know what they're supposed to learn and why they're supposed to learn it. That alone is going to help with student motivation. If they know the why and the how, it's going to help them be motivated and it's going to make the learning clearer. So, I want to talk about a learning intention versus the purpose for reading. I just noticed I made my slide backwards. So, I'm going to talk about learning intentions first. A learning intention partners with success criteria. Success criteria is how you will know and how the student will know that they have been successful. Okay? A learning intention is a daily statement of what the student is expected to learn in a given lesson or reading. Effective teachers start with a standard, break the learning that standard requires into bite-sized chunks, and then phrase these chunks so that students will be able to understand them. Each of these chunked phrases is the daily statement of what students are expected to learn in a given lesson. That's a learning intention. Okay? If a student knows what they are supposed to learn that day and how they're going to know that they've learned it, it's going to increase motivation and it's going to help them better understand whether they've learned it or not. So students said, what are students learning today and how will they know they've learned it? That's some new learning for me through my work with Corwin in the visible literacy. It's been very powerful to help students, instead of just putting an I can statement that's a general statement of your standard, break each day down into a chunk of what they're learning that day and how they'll know that they've learned it. The purpose of reading. It's important for students to understand the definition of reading and focus on the how and why we read in each particular class. So the purpose for reading differs from what students have learned about as far as author's purpose, which means when an author writes, it writes for the reason of either entertaining, persuading, or informing or teaching the reader about something. So students need to be explicitly taught that the purpose for reading in science, social studies, or math will have a different purpose than reading in their language arts classes. It would be beneficial for each teacher to share the how and the why that we read in each particular discipline. So some purposes for reading across the disciplines. For example, language arts. Their purpose for reading in language arts could be to search for the author's craft. Let's analyze the choices an author made while he was writing. Or maybe we're looking for the theme of a story, exploring the human experience. Language arts might use resources such as short stories, novels, journal articles. Science is going to look totally different than that. Science is going to be reading to apply. They're going to learn about and use models and carry out investigations. Or they're going to read for the purpose of exploring. How does the world connect or work physically and biologically? They might be reading for the purpose of testing to see how a hypothesis developed by another person worked. They're reading a lab report, right? So the resources for science might be lab reports, charts and graphs, scientific journal articles. Social studies, their purpose could be for sourcing, like who created the text and how does that affect the viewpoint and readability, reliability. Or that's such a hard, tricky word for me, corroborating, comparing and contrasting points of view across texts, right? Contextualizing, placing a document into a historical context, date, place, and events. Kids deserve to know the purpose for why they're reading and how it differs from one subject to the next so that they can better approach the text and have a purpose for reading. Math, You're going to be critiquing, so judge mathematical arguments. I'd also like to add that you could be reading your word problems and having to close read those to see what they're asking you to do. And even in art and music, you might be responding, you might be critiquing or connecting to a piece of art or a piece of music. So it's basically very important for students to understand the difference between reading in an ELA classroom in a novel or a short story and reading a lab report or a primary document. The purpose for those are totally different. It says embrace discipline specific reading. So we need to broaden our view of what even constitutes a text, right? Like what we just talked about, a map can be a text, a word problem can be a text, a historical document is a text. It's not just a novel or a short story. We need to move our mindset beyond the idea of memorizing stuff as learning and really thinking about what it means to interpret information in a variety of ways. So, with the right approach and changing the mindset that content teachers are not responsible for teaching literacy strategies, we can help support them in seeing the power behind using some of these literacy strategies in their instruction. So, interactive read alouds and sharing the purpose for reading are powerful strategies that enhance literacy in the content areas. Interactive read alouds engage students and improve their metacognitive strategies and their comprehension through teacher modeling. Sharing the purpose for reading helps students understand the relevance and the focus on key concepts, as well as gives them the knowledge of how to approach the text they are reading. Together, these strategies promote holistic skill development, support cross-disciplinary literacy, and empower teachers to address diverse learning needs, ultimately fostering a lifelong love for reading and learning, which, by the way, is part of my vision statement. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you test out these two strategies. Thank you for listening.